I know a lot of people who think Candace is lying or that she's a grifter and that she's just faking it until she makes it, all of that stuff, right? And so I'm really glad that we have confirmation that the screenshots that she showed yesterday are in fact true. And one of the reasons why this episode had a big impact on me is because of the fact that it reaffirms why I really enjoy watching Candace. A lot of people definitely want to know what Candace has to say about a lot of different issues. Now, with me being such a huge fan of Candace Owens, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that she says, and that also doesn't mean that she gets everything right. But in this instance, I am really glad that the screenshots were proven correct. And it's funny because I've seen older clips of Candace, and I actually don't like the older clips of her when she's younger. I think she talks differently, and she just seems like she's a smartass who's super annoying, and you just want to pop her, and I don't like that. And so I feel like whenever I'm watching her content, because I really started watching her in 2020, that version of her just feels so much more authentic. The version of her that we are getting now feels really authentic, and it makes it that much easier to watch her show every day, listen to what she has to say, and then use your brain processing power to figure out if you agree with what she has to say or if you don't agree. And it's really crazy how if you don't agree, it has to lead to this big thing. You have to disavow her, you can't watch her anymore. It doesn't have to be anything crazy like that. You just simply disagree with whatever she has to say on a particular topic. And it's so funny watching people online bash her, disagree with her, call her crazy, so that she's unhinged, because I'm watching her and I'm like, she's making a lot of sense to me. I don't know what the problem is, right? Because again, you can process what she's saying and either you agree or you don't. It doesn't have to be that she's crazy or she's ranting or she's raving and she's having a breakdown. No, she's just speaking the truth as she knows it, and you agree with it or you don't agree with it. And I think it's so interesting that people are trying to get other people to stop watching her. Like, if you don't want to watch her, fine, cool, do your thing. But if people do want to watch her and support her, they should be allowed to do that, because again, in my opinion, she's very entertaining and she does tell the truth like it is. And if you don't agree with that, that's totally fine. She's not forcing you to tune in. And I know that a lot of people are saying like, hey, she's grifting because she's drawing it out as far as when she's going to drop her evidence and all of that stuff. But again, you can just choose to tune out if you're not interested in that. So there is a reason that you are watching her, and it's not because you really want to see whatever evidence she's going to drop. It's because you want to hear her take on whatever the issue is. And so I just find that super interesting in regards to today's episode, because I think that this is just proof of why people keep coming back to her channel, watching her and wanting to get her take on different issues. And right now everybody really wants her take and wants to hear what she has to say about Charlie Kirk. Okay, so getting into the show, there are a few things that she talked about, and I was fascinated by what she said about the dreams part of this episode. And basically, she retold a story of how she was telling her producer, hey, you're pregnant, you are going to have a boy, because she had a dream, and she was saying that that producer's unborn son, like the spirit of that producer's son, came to her in a dream, and then like the next day she told the producer about it, and then the producer ended up being pregnant. And I actually remember her telling that story, and I think it would have been on one of her old Daily Wire episodes, and so I'm not super surprised by that. That makes total sense to me. It is believable, especially because I am sort of a spiritual person. I do believe in psychics and spirits and all of that stuff. It's not that far-fetched for me, and I also have very vivid dreams, but my dreams are about my dogs, and I really hate when I'm really thinking about something or obsessing over something, because if I think about it all day and I'm obsessing over it, that actually shows up in my dreams. And I can absolutely understand where she would be coming from in sharing this story, because I'm sure she spent so many hours looking into everything that is going on with Charlie Kirk, intentionally or unintentionally, right? And so she is forced to think about this, and she has to spend so many hours and so much time on this that it's going to spill over into her sleep, right? And so I just found that part of it fascinating, because she did mention that she dreamed about Charlie Kirk, and he was telling her like, hey, you know, you're doing the right thing, basically. And so I don't think that you have to take that at face value if you're not into that thing, or if you think that she's just telling that story to really trying to draw people in emotionally. It depends on you and what you believe, and if you don't believe in spirituality or whatever, or spirit, then just disregard that. But I actually think that that is super important, and it makes sense that that would happen given how much time she is thinking about this consciously, so it's going to show up in her subconscious as well. I am fully prepared though for people to be making this a headline tomorrow when we wake up about how she's unhinged because now she's talking about dreaming about Charlie Kirk, because I've seen other people talk about how she is handling this wrong, she's acting like a jilted lover and all of this stuff. And so I just find that super fascinating, because if you don't watch her show, because a lot of people who are commenting on Candace, they don't watch her show, and it's not that you have to watch every single episode in order to understand her, but you need to at least watch one episode or a few episodes to understand how she talks, how she thinks, and how she approaches things, because she makes a lot of like what you would consider inside jokes or things that you would only be really familiar with if you watch her show. And so there was one moment where I can't recall what it was, but it had to have been in the last week or two, where she was talking about taking her kids to school and asking questions to the teacher, and they wouldn't answer, and then she was doing all of that in her video, and I saw somebody clip that, and they were basically using this to say that she was going crazy. But again, if you didn't know why she was saying that or doing that, you're gonna think she's going crazy. And so I just find that super interesting, because I'm creating my own content and I clip people to include that in my video, and I understand how hard it is to keep people in the proper context when you need to use a really short clip and all of that stuff, right? And so I find it super fascinating from that aspect. But again, going back to my original point, if you don't really watch her content, you're not really commenting on Candace as we see her in her episodes. You're commenting on the public perception of her or her reputation. A lot of people can say your reputation is who you are and all of that stuff, but again, her reputation is built off of people who don't like her, people who had bad experiences with her, whatever, right? I don't think that means because some people or other people had a bad experience with her, but that means that overall she's a bad person and she can't be trusted, right? And so again, you can make up your own mind about Candace, but I really thought that today's episode, with the confirmation of the screenshots, with that letter from the TPUSA donor backing her up, basically, that really sharpened and strengthened her credibility at this point. The other thing I want to get into is the group text. So again, as I've mentioned throughout this episode, those group texts have been confirmed as being real. What Charlie Kirk said in those screenshots actually happened. And so I've seen people saying, well, if the screenshots are real, why does this matter? Why is this important? Because first it was, no, he wasn't shifting his stance. He was pro-Israel. He was always going to be pro-Israel. Now you've had Candace claim verbally, hey, no, he was shifting. Now you have physical proof, and now you want to say it doesn't matter. It does matter, because what the screenshots show is that, one, behind the scenes, he was shifting his views, and then because he's dead, because he was assassinated, he's not actually allowed to explore what those different views mean. He doesn't get that opportunity to change his perspective and to grow his opinions and think about things a lot differently than he did before, right? And so that was taken from him. And so there are implications for that when you do not get the opportunity to have a different opinion about something else, to change your views, and to be able to explore what that means and the impact that has on your life. And so I think it is important in that aspect, because what this means is that he didn't get very far in changing his views. In fact, possibly changing his views cost him his life. And so that is important, because certain organizations and groups where once you're in and you can't get out, that sort of thing, right? And so you don't want to be in that situation where you make a decision at a super young age and now you're stuck with whatever decision you made and you can't get away from it. You should always be able to grow and change. And I think that is super important. That is the point of what these screenshots reveal, that he was changing his mind. He made it public to the people who were in his private circle, and he may have paid for that decision and that changing of his stance with his life. And the reason why I think that this is so important, because yes, there is a trail on YouTube from his different interviews and podcast appearances where he was basically expressing his frustration with Israel, with his donors, with other things relating to TPUSA and what they do in terms of being pro-Israel. It's one thing for him to do that, but still say, hey, I'm still pro-Israel, I still love Israel, all of that stuff, right? It's another thing to learn behind the scenes that he was talking very differently and he was pushed to think very differently about an issue that was very dear to him. So you have to wonder, what is it that's driving someone to make that drastic of a change if this is something that they really believe in? And so obviously people like Nick Fuentes mentioned, because Candace had a screenshot or something like that in her episode, and he was basically saying, oh, well, you know, what made him change his mind? Not getting paid anymore, right? And so there are some people who will be like, hey, you know, I don't want to risk losing the money, so I'm going to think the same way. I'm going to do whatever they tell me, right? And we know that Candace is not that type of person, because she stood on business and basically lost everything when she left the Daily Wire, because she was not willing to back down on the fact that genocide is never okay, regardless of who is doing it, right? She was not willing to stop pushing the issue and having those different conversations about what October 7th meant and how this impacts the people who are supporting Israel, and what it means when people say that there's a genocide going on in Gaza, and also what it means when people publicly challenge other foreign leaders and all of that stuff. What is the consequence of doing that? And so Candace basically has challenged two public foreign officials, whatever. She's indirectly kind of called out Netanyahu. They have never gotten into any type of back and forth to my knowledge, and I don't think she's gotten into one with the Macrons in that same sort of sense, but they are obviously kind of indirectly talking through lawyers and all of that stuff. And so she is not afraid to take on powerful people, political figures who are the heads of states of other countries, and she is still alive. She is still allowed to be able to do that and to change her opinions, right? And so I think that is super important, because not everybody gets to do that, and you want the one person who has been able to do that to speak up and step up for other people and tell the truth and make sure that this is a world that we can live in, where we are allowed to tell the truth and we don't have to face punishment for doing that. So to reiterate what it means that these screenshots are real, that this is actually what Charlie Kirk said, is that one, it proves that Candace wasn't lying. It proves that someone like Charlie Kirk is allowed to change his opinion. He can change his opinion. What does it mean in the grand scheme of things when you change your opinion and that's not allowed? Lastly, I want to move on to another topic, Charlie Kirk's legacy. So, is his legacy Turning Point USA, or is it his actions and his impact that he has had on people? I think that this is a very interesting concept, because the narrative that people are pushing is that what Candace is doing, what other people are doing, and asking questions about what happened to Charlie Kirk, that this is in some way damaging his legacy. So, in other words, this is damaging the reputation of Turning Point USA. And from what Charlie Kirk said in one of his interview, I believe he said that he wanted to be remembered for his faith. He did not say that he wanted to be remembered for starting TPUSA, for being the head of TPUSA and expanding TPUSA, right? He said that he wanted to be remembered for his faith. And so in that sense, his legacy is not being ruined if people ask questions about TPUSA or what was going on with his assassination. And I personally think that TPUSA won't be able to survive once this initial 2-month period of grieving him and still kind of processing his assassination. I don't think TPUSA is going to get the same support that they are getting currently, because it's just not going to be the same organization without Charlie Kirk, and also with knowing that he was changing his stances on certain issues, which meant that Turning Point would have changed along with him. Now, even if TPUSA closes or they never function again as a business, I don't think that that means that Charlie Kirk's legacy is ruined. Again, his legacy is his faith and what he inspired other people to do in regards to their own faith. We've heard about Bible sales going through the roof because people are so inspired by Charlie Kirk, his assassination, and they want to make a difference in their lives. They want to change things around, and they are looking for meaning in their lives, and they want to do so in a positive way. They want to turn to God and religion, Christianity. They don't want to go out and create chaos and do crazy stuff just because they are lost and looking for meaning, right? They want to do something productive and positive with their time to make a difference for themselves and their communities. So getting back to this idea of asking questions somehow ruining Charlie Kirk's legacy, I don't think that that is the case because again, his legacy is his actions and the impact that he has had on people. And I really hate how people are framing it as if his legacy is being ruined by people asking questions, because it would be completely different if people were digging into Charlie Kirk's past and trying to expose some big, huge secret illegal thing that he did, right? It's not like people are trying to expose him and say, hey, look, this is a bad guy. He did X, Y, and Z. You should hate him. You should not support him, right? So I just find it really hard to understand why people think that investigating his death and looking into it somehow ruins his legacy. Now, unless something horrible about Charlie Kirk comes out, then yeah, I can see that. But people aren't approaching this investigation with that in mind. They're really trying to expose the people around Charlie Kirk who made this happen, who allowed it to happen, and who wanted it to happen, right? And so it is about Charlie Kirk, but it's also about the other people who are directly involved in this. And the other thing that I want to comment on is because Candace read a letter from a donor from TPUSA, and basically the donor came out and said, hey, we support what Candace is doing. If you, as a Christian nation, don't stand up and demand answers for this, if you are willing to allow an innocent person to be put to death and there's just reason to believe that they did not commit this crime, you should want to find out the truth. Like, there are plenty of people who are in prison now, and some people may wrongfully be in prison like they didn't commit the crime. You wouldn't want them to be put to death for something that they didn't do. You can't undo that, so you better be sure that they did it, right? And so I think that that is the right approach to have, because in today's society, with all of these cameras, with all of these people able to dig into things and find out different pieces of information to put a puzzle together, you would hate to think that in 2025 it's so easy to frame someone, to sentence someone to death, and then just get away with it. Like, it's not the 1960s like people said. This sort of thing should not be able to go over so easy. You should be making it difficult every step of the way for things like this to happen, where people can do things this horrific and get away with it. And so I really like that someone with a big platform, even though this is a donor, I don't know the name, I'm not familiar with who TPUSA donors are and all of that stuff. I'm not sure how many people in the general public know that anyway, but I do appreciate when other people with big platforms are stepping up and defending Candace, because like she said, she doesn't need it, but you always want to know who else is standing on the side of truth, who else is making it difficult for people to get answers or difficult for other people to ask questions. You want to know who the people are who are encouraging this and who are doing this in good faith, and they want to have sincere and genuine and actual answers about what happened here. On the flip side, I do try to listen to people who disagree with Candace or who are pushing back on this, because I want to get both sides of the argument so that helps me make my decision on where I stand, because I kind of, for the most part, know where I stand, but hearing the other side helps to reaffirm the decision or help me shift slightly if there is something that I didn't factor in. And so that's why I'll listen to a lot of people who don't agree with Candace, just to see what they're saying, what their arguments are, and if that changes something for me. And there's been a few people that I've stopped following, stopped watching their content, just because they've taken that approach of going after Candace or going after other people, and I don't fully agree with what they said or how they did it, and it's just a turn off for me. It doesn't make me want to continue watching your content, because then I feel like maybe you're being disingenuous about something else. And so I think it is important that we stand on the side of truth and we try to get those answers however we can, because there are a lot of people who go through these tragedies who are left on their own to figure out what happened to their loved ones. Nobody's helping them. The investigation is publicly officially closed, and they are still trying to get answers. They're doing everything they can by themselves, financially, putting in the labor, going out, asking questions, and all of this stuff, right? And they're doing it all on their own. So when you have people like Candace, obviously she has a personal investment in this. When you have people like Candace who are using their platform to get the story out there and getting other people who are also invested in figuring out what happened to help and assist with the investigation to get closure and to get answers, I think that is a very important thing, because that's what journalists do. Journalists get the story out there, they gather the facts, and they expose the whole thing. And so I think that this is the biggest story of our lifetime. We've never seen an assassination like this, especially if you're a millennial like me. I'm 35, about to be 36, and this is not something that I've ever seen before. And I don't want this to be like JFK, like I mentioned in my last episode, where we have to wait decades to figure out what happened. Like, we should know what happened immediately. We have the technology, we have the brain processing power to figure out what happened here and get closer to the truth and whatever it is that we are supposed to believe. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. I think that we didn't make a whole lot of progress, but I think that we've also made significant steps because we established that the screenshots are real. We've restored Candace's credibility in some sense, and so I really do want to know where we go from here. What new information will we get? Because I did mention in my last video I wanted to see if Josh Hammer responded. He did not. Candace went at him pretty hard. She played a clip of where he was basically talking about how Charlie did not change his stance. She revealed, hey, you were part of that group text. You may have spoken to him 24 hours before he was assassinated. And so basically, why are you lying? Why are you going on your shows, your interviews, whatever, your appearances, right? Why are you doing those and lying about what happened if you know more? And so that's always scary when you see that publicly people are saying one thing and then behind the closed doors they're saying something different and you never know. And so I think everybody is super invested in figuring out what happened and figuring out as much as they can, because I really do think that changes American society and American culture and American politics, that something like this has happened, because I don't think anybody expected this. Like, yes, Donald Trump was shot at, the person missed, all of that stuff, but even that would have been huge if he had been assassinated too, because again, this is not something that you see in America in modern times. And so something like this happening on American soil to people like Charlie Kirk, who are just telling the truth, who are just debating, they're not resorting to violence, they're not encouraging violence, that sort of thing. It really is crazy. So yeah, let me know what you think about Candace's recent episode, what you think about the screenshots being proven as being real. Where do you think we go from here? What are you wanting to see from Candace next? And what do you think is going to be revealed in the grand scheme of things? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.